Great, so now we have a sketch of our graphical user interface, and that should make things easier. So now you can just go ahead and code your graphical user interface in Python using the Tkinter features. So Tkinter is a library that we'll be using to make this interface. And I suppose you already know Tkinter because I explained that in one of the previous sections. So if you don't know Tkinter, please go back 2 sections before this, and then you'll be able to understand what I'm talking about here. So I'll keep the sketch on the right. And now you know that to make a graphical user interface with Tkinter, you can either use the pack methods to pack your widgets or the grid method. We'll be using the grid method, so it could be a good idea to actually make a grid on your sketch. So that when you create your widgets, let's say you create a button, you'd want to pass the number of the row and the number of the column. So having a grid like this will make things easier. Alright. And I'll just like to delete this doc string. We don't need it, and it saves me space so that you can see a cleaner workspace here. Alright, from Tkinter, import everything. So I'm not explaining the code now because you already know these things. If there is something new, I'll go through it. Window equals to tk, so the tk method that creates a window object, and then you want to apply the main loop method, which is basically a way to wrap up all the widgets that you will enter in this space now. Alright, so we have 4 labels here. So we have a label title and author, year, and ISBN. So I'm just going to create 4 labels, or 4 label objects. So I'll name my objects, my variables, from L1 to L4, and we use the label method for that. Window is the parent window, and text would be title. So Control Enter, you can go to the next line, no matter where you are in the previous line. So you don't have to just switch, go to here and then press Enter. You just press Control Enter and you go to the next line. L1, you apply the grid method. So the first label is on row 0 and column 0 as well. Then you can just copy this and paste it 3 more times. So that would be L2, L3, and L4. And you'd also want to change the text of your label, year, and ISBN. Author would be column 2, as you see from the sketch. So 0, 2, then we have the year would be 1, 0, and then 1, 2 for the last label. So let's see what we have. I'd just like to call my script. Alright, looks promising. Now let's add the entries. So these were static widgets. Now we need to add some entries. So E1 would be entry, and an entry gets the window as the first parameter, just like any other widget does, and also a text variable parameter. This text variable parameter, this expects as an argument the value that the user will enter in the entry widget, and that is a spatial data type. So you first need to actually create a data type here, an object with of that data type. So let's call it, we are creating the entry for the title, say title text equal to string var. So this is the function that creates this spatial object, and that would be equal to that title text. So that's it. And you also need to grid this entry widget. So grid And the first widget, so the title widget, corresponds with row 0 and column 1. So that's it. I can quickly multiply this here and author text, here text, and ISBN text. You also need to change the numbers of your variables, just like that. And of course you need to pass that these user entries in here. So this should be n and these 2. Alright, and lastly you want to specify the rows and the columns for these entries too. So it would be 0, 3, and then we have the year text widget 1, 1. Alright, and the last entry 1, 3. Alright, let's check it out. Yeah, looks good. Great. And now it's the turn of the list box. So let's call it list1, why not? And that would be equal to list box window. And then you would want to specify the height of your list box and the width as well. So I thought about putting 6 and 35. It would be a good height and width. You can taste different heights and width and see what comes better. And then I'd like to grid this. So grid, and so this would start at row number 2 and column 0. However, if we leave it like this, things will not go as we expect. Actually, we can try this. And as you can see, the list box occupied only the first cell. So the first cell of the first column on row 0, 1, 2. So row 2, column 0. What we want instead is to span this list box on the other columns as well and on the other rows, because we'll have buttons here later, so we'll want to span that. And you can see the sketch here. So we can add a row span parameter, and that would be equal to 6, and column span as well, so that would be 2. Alright, so that would be a list box. However, we also need to actually add a scroll bar there, so that the lists can be scrolled when there are lots of data in the list, lots of records. To attach a scroll bar to the list, the logic here works like this. You create your scroll bar, and then you tell your scroll bar about the list that the scroll bar has to scroll. And then you tell your list as well who its scroll bar is. So let's first create the scroll bar, an independent scroll bar. So let's say sb1 scroll bar method, and that is attached to the window. And then you apply the grid method. So the scroll bar would be on row 1, column 3. And once you created these two objects, you want to apply a configure method to the list box and a configure method to the scroll bar object. And these configure methods get arguments. So this would be scroll command equals to sb1.set. That's it. So meaning that the vertical scroll bar along the y-axis will be set to this scroll bar. And then you go to the scroll bar method. Sorry, this has to be configure. Then you pass command equals to list1.yView. So that should work. You are passing a command parameter here, so meaning that when you scroll the bar, the view, the vertical view of the list will change. So let's see how this goes. And seems like I've messed up something here. I have put the position of the scroll bar on row 1, I guess, and column 3, yeah. So the scroll bar should be actually row 2, column 2. Let's check that again. Yep, seems to be working. Though it doesn't look very centered because we need to span it through the same rows as we have spanned the list box here. So we need to add here a row span parameter and set it to 6. And now the scroll bar looks centered. Alright, so now what we've left is to add these button widgets just here. Great. So we have 6 buttons. Let's start with the first one. We have the button method, window and text, so buttons have text. View all is the first one. And then I thought of putting a width of 12. So B1 grid, that would be row 2, column 3. And we have 5 more buttons. So I'll paste this. Six, I think. So B2, B3, 4, and 6. Of course, these buttons don't have a command parameter now, because later we will add here a command parameter, and that will decide what the buttons will do. But for now, that is just fine. So these buttons will be aligned in column 3, all of them, and everyone has a different row value. And 6. Great, so let's see what we got. And boom! I forgot to put a row number for the close button. 7. And now it looks better. So this was how to build a graphical user interface. Of course, these buttons don't do anything for now. So in the next lecture, I'll show you how to attach actions to this graphical user interface. So we will work on the backend, and we'll be using SQLite 3 for interacting with the database and fetching those data in this graphical user interface. So I hope my routines and my practices will help you to build graphical user interfaces with easy. And I'll see you in the next lecture.